up YouTube? My name is Trinity and welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. So today we are going to be continuing our internet horror series by talking about the granddaddy of all creepypastas. Yes, we are talking about Slenderman. So before we actually get into the meat of the video, I wanted to let you guys know that I have recently opened an Etsy shop called That Spooky Spot. So I actually opened this shop while I was recovering last year, where I was turning my original artwork into stickers. Along with the stickers that I hand drew, there are also just some stickers on there that are sayings that can show that you are into the spooky lifestyle. And using Canva, I also created a few 18 by 24 inch posters of different cryptids that we have talked about on the channel. So if you're interested in checking it out and supporting my Etsy shop, I will leave it in the description down below. But please, unless there is something on the shop that you actually want, don't just buy it to make me happy, because I want to make stuff that people genuinely want to buy. So Slenderman. This tall, lanky, fancily dressed man was born on June 10th, 2009. Unlike many other creepypastas that we talked about that originated through people's creative writing, he actually was born through pictures. On the web forum Something Awful, there was a Photoshop contest where the prompt was create a paranormal image. It was very simple, and from this, user Victor Surge created the two original photos that Slenderman originated from. Now on screen you'll see the two images that were submitted, but beneath the photos there were also brief captions that kind of started the lore around what Slenderman would become. Now the caption under the first picture said, quote, "We didn't want to go, we didn't want to kill them, but its persistent silence and outstretched arms horrified and comforted us at the same time." And in the lore of this universe, this quote was written down in 1983, photographer unknown, presumed dead. And the caption beneath the second picture was a bit more detailed. Quote, "One of two recovered photographs from the Sterling City Library blaze. Notable for being taken the day at which 14 children vanished and for what is referenced to as the Slenderman. Deformities cited as film defects by officials. Fire at library occurred 1 week later. Actual photograph confiscated as evidence." This one was attributed to the year 1986, the photographer being Mary Thomas, who apparently went missing on June 13th of the same year. And from there, the internet did as the internet does, and they took these two pictures and created an entire character, an entire lore around it. This is truly something that I love about creepypastas because, like I said before, these collaborative writing projects, people just add on, and so much depth and lore is added to what started as entries for a Photoshop contest. Now, the user that originally created Slenderman did give a few examples as to where his inspiration came from. A few of them were The Mist by Stephen King, very fucked up movie by the way, and I love it. Survival horror games such as Resident Evil and Silent Hill, and legends of shadow people, and even, yes, Mothman. He wanted to, quote, "formulate something whose motivations can barely be comprehended and which caused unease and terror in a general population." And this confusion around what the motivations of this monster are really adds to its horror, because the scariest part of a horror movie or a novel or anything really is the part that's unknown. You don't know what the monster that's stalking you can do, or you don't know what the killer chasing you, what their true motivation or intentions are. Besides killing you, obviously. So having a being that seems to have a very specific way of doing things, but you have no idea why it's doing it, its intentions, its motivations, it's very scary because you don't know how to combat it. A professor from the University of Georgia actually wrote a book talking about Slenderman and internet horror in general, and actually pointed out the similarities between Slenderman and lore about fairies, which is very interesting, but let me explain. So in her book titled Folklore, Horror Stories, and the Slenderman, The Development of an Internet Mythology, Professor Shira Chess points out the similarities between fairies, in which Slenderman is portrayed as an otherworldly being. And where the general appearance of Slenderman is consistent, it shifts a bit based on who is seeing it and what they fear most. He also lives in the woods and is known to abduct children. Again, we don't know why any of this happens in the lore of Slenderman, which creates that air of mystery and unease because we don't know how to protect ourselves from it. Others in that thread of the Something Awful forum began adding on to Slenderman. User Threw Up, I assume that's how that's said, created a 16th century folklore surrounding a being called Der Grossmann. I think that's right, but it's supposed to be German, in which they implied an early reference to what Slenderman would eventually become. So again, creating history and backstory to this being that came from two photos, or pictures, photos, whatever you want to call them. Now, Slenderman went viral soon after his creation, but he really blew up in 2012 with the release of the game Slender the 8 Pages by Mark J. Hadley. Within the first month after its release, it was downloaded over 2 million times. Now that I've given some background as to where Slenderman came from, I want to get more into his in-universe lore. Because of the nature of creepypastas and so many people adding on to the same story, the same creation, there is going to be some things that are variable between authors, so nothing is specifically canon. So lore can vary between works, but this is what I found that kind of across the board fits. So as the name suggests, Slenderman is very tall, slender, and lanky, and he wears a suit. His arms are described as grotesquely long, almost tentacle-like, and sometimes he actually has tentacles coming out of his back as well. While most depictions of Slenderman show a blank white face with no discernible features, there are some entries about Slenderman that say he can actually have a face and it changes based on who is looking at him, kind of getting back to he reflects what you are scared of. Now, he is associated with the forest and old abandoned buildings and apparently has the ability to teleport. Apparently, when humans come within a certain proximity of him, they start to experience what is called slender sickness, symptoms of which are rapid onset paranoia, delusions, nosebleeds, and nightmares. Most stories about Slenderman are from the point of view of very young victims, either children, teenagers, or young adults, sometimes being driven insane by him and becoming his proxies, a term coined by the Marble Hornets series on YouTube. Now, proxies are the humans that come under the control of Slenderman and are compelled to carry out his deeds. Apparently, looking into the topic of Slenderman or topics revolving around him would kind of call him into you. You would become the focus of his attention. Another trope that was introduced by this series was the ability of Slenderman to interfere with photos, video recordings, and audio recordings, as well as the use of a marking that came to be known as the Slender symbol. Now, the conclusions of these stories generally end without knowing what happens to the victim. This is why violence and body horror isn't really popular within the Slenderman universe, because it's too obvious and on the nose. Having it never explicitly said what happens to these victims, just that they went off with Slenderman, keeps it vague and open-ended. Like I said earlier, you don't know what the intentions are. Are you going to become a proxy? Are you going to be killed somehow? You don't know, and it's that unease, that unknown that keeps you wondering and keeps Slenderman in your mind. That's why psychological horror works so great with Slenderman as a concept, just because even in-universe, developing the slender sickness, you don't know what's real or what's not. And with these unreliable narrators that can't discern real from fiction, it also leaves mystery and interpretation open to the reader. Despite Slenderman being a work of collaborative fiction on the internet has a way of bleeding into real life sometimes. This internet urban legend was apparently the catalyst behind a young girl attacking her mother, another girl setting fire to her family home, and the attempted murder of a 12-year-old girl by 2 of her classmates. A string of attempted suicide attempts on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in 2015 by several young people was also suggested to be the work of a suicide spirit that in their culture was similar to Slenderman. Now, I know we touched on a couple of very dark subjects briefly, and I'm not going to go too much more into those, except for possibly a future video on the infamous Slender stabbing that happened a couple of years ago. That is something I might touch on, I'm not quite sure yet. But I did want to illustrate how fiction can often bleed into reality, and just how, even though things on the internet are on our screens, they're not tangible, that they can become very real very quickly. And it is no exception with the things that I talk about, these internet horrors. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a like and sharing with your friends if you think they'd enjoy it as well. And if you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell notification so you will be notified when I upload. If you enjoyed this video or the topic of internet horror broadly, be sure to check out my internet horror playlist. And like I said earlier, if you're interested, check out my Etsy, which will also be linked down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.